We're a minute early, but let's go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome to the 9th annual Connection Community Collaboration. This actually started 9 years ago when I was at AHR, Chicago, cold as hell, typical, and I'm standing in line for a cab, and I feel this tap on the back of my back, and it's Ken Sinclair. He says, "You want to share a cab?" Sure, why not? Where are you going? Wherever we're going. So as we were in the cab, we started to talk, and we said, what do we see in the industry? What's needed? And immediately we both came up, we need more collaboration, more sharing information, more, just camaraderie. So we said, let's have a conversation a little bit later on, and we came up with this whole concept. So this is the 9th year. Again, for those who don't know me, my name is Marc Petock. I'm the Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at LinkSpring. We're going to talk about insights, trends, perspectives, truly an open conversation with some of our industry's key influencers. And one of the nice things about this team that we've got here, not only being all-stars in their own right, for good or bad, I happen to call each of them a personal friend. So again, I am not responsible for what they say, so just remember that. So one of the things that we're going to start off with is a brief, and again, key word here, brief opening statement by each of our panelists. And then we're going to get into a series of open conversations based on specific topics that I asked them. And some of the topics I have shared with the panel, some I have not. And so after this list of topics, we're going to go into a lightning round. And what that lightning round truly is, I'm going to ask a question, go down the line or call on them, and ask the only answer I want is yes, no, or I plead the fifth. And so from there on, at the end, we're going to do a 30-second wrap up for each, and hopefully we'll have some times for questions and things like that. And on that, please don't be bashful in asking questions. We definitely want to get those. So joining me today, and raise your hands as I call your name, Paul Maximock, who is Senior Consultant, Intelligent Buildings for Newcomb & Boyd. Howard Berger, Managing Partner, Realcomm and IBCon. Gary Ament, IoT Solutions Architecture, FSG Smart Buildings. Steve Dodd, President Partner, HVAC Concepts. And Brad Colt, Associate Vice President, Building Technologies and Intelligent Buildings Practices for HGA Architects and Engineers. So as you can see, we have a diverse group, and is what the intent of this was. So without further ado, let me get a 1-minute opening statement. Let's just go down the line. Paul, why don't you start? 1 minute, though.
1 minute. Okay, 59 seconds. So I'm from Newcomb & Boyd. Our headquarters is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We are truly engaged with expansion in this industry. We've seen growth from a revenue standpoint and team building of 400% in 2 years since COVID hit. Imagine that during a time when businesses were shutting down, we had growth. So what's amazing is we look at technology and what we see out in the real world right now, and there's a huge separation from there. We see a lot of legacy product. We see a lot of new product that's starting to come into the new organizations that are trying to be at the top of the curve. And it's very interesting, and I'm glad we're going to have this conversation to continue on. So I don't want to take your minute.
Good. Howard?
Thanks, Mark. Howard Berger. I'm one of the partners that produces the Realcomm IBCon conference that was launched back in 1999. And compared to AHR Expo, we're just a tiny conference. But the thing that kind of differentiates us is we focus on bringing together the end users, the owners, the developers, the big corporate occupiers, the big REITs, and their IT facilities, building engineers, asset managers, developers, and they come together to talk about technology. And the goal is that we can, have conversations that'll hopefully move adoption of smart building technologies a little bit faster. And I handle the programs, so I'm the only one on the, up here on the panel who's not a controls guy, integrator, distributor, or HVAC, engineer. One of the things that we do every year at the conference, and first of all, with the programs, I think just about everybody on this panel and a lot of folks in the room have been involved in the conference as a moderator, panelist, speaker, or advisor. And I just want to mention that one of the things that we do every year, it started in 2012, is we produce what we call a Smart Building Integrator Summit. And this is not just SIs, system integrators and MSIs, but it's also, building engineers and HVAC folks and controls folks, building performance folks, and some end users. We get together in a room for a half a day and we talk about the big challenges in the industry. And last year, Scott Cochran was one of our chairs, as was Donnie Walker from Newcomb Boyd and Craig Stevenson from Oris. And they lead a world-class team of advisors, including a lot of the folks, again, at this table and in the room. And so I'd encourage you guys to take a look at that and, possibly think about joining us. Conference will be June this year. We'll make the formal announcement this week, still inking the deal on the contract, but keep an eye out for it. And so thank you, Mark.
Okay, good. Let's move. No, thank you. We're going to keep going. Steve Dodd.
So good afternoon, Steve Dodd, HVAC Concepts. We're a master system integrator in the DC Baltimore area. Started out in the trade in 1974 as an apprentice for an HVAC firm in the DC area. Been fortunate enough to work for a lot of the large manufacturers out there, Johnson, Siemens, Trane. I've been a Schneider rep, so I worked at Tritium for a while with Marc. Very interested in hearing the questions that come out because my interest is really in the end user. 90% of our work is direct with owner. So we listen to their feedback and learn stuff every day, right? And I'd like to hear everybody's feedback here and what you're experiencing, and then maybe share some of the insights that we get from our customers. So
great. Gary?
I'm Gary Amen. I'm Solutions Architect for FSG Smart Buildings. We're typically known for rolling out national account installs, 3,000 at a time. We fill the big white space of convenience stores, small box retail that's a lot of times missed in these conversations. Nothing wrong with built up buildings, but our business is to serve the smaller customer base, but do it 1,000 times and do it well. I'm really humbled by this experience. Thank you for inviting me to do this, Mark, and everybody else. What we share today is not about us. It's bigger than us. And I'm continually hopeful that we can train our customers to make a conscious decision and do the right thing and not be specifically driven by what's socially correct at the time, because there is some unintended consequences that can happen when we start saying technology is going to fix everything, because it never really ever does. So I'm hoping we can get into some of that, but I'm happy to be here and thank you very much.
Great, thanks. Brad?
Yeah, Brad Colton with HGA Architects and Engineers. I'm a intelligent buildings strategist, and I come to this industry through the low voltage, so division 2728, if you're familiar with those specifications. So I don't have an HVAC background, not even much of a controls background, but I'm helping to bridge that IT and OT, which is something that we've seen missing I think it's getting better over the years, but bringing a little bit more of those IT best practices to building automation. And working in an integrated architecture and engineering firm. So it brings a lot of great opportunities to be able to take the various folks who I work with and all the talents that they have and bring them all together. So I'm often saying I'm not the subject matter expert, but I know how to connect the right people at the right time to be able to deliver these solutions. And I believe our clients are really looking for solutions that are going to end up having a business impact. They want to know about use cases and how is that going to be driving their business more than they want to know about the technology that's behind that. So we have to make that transparent to them, make it something that they're able to work with, and it's not getting in their way. It's just empowering and enabling them to do what they need to do.
Great, thanks. All right, now let's get into the meat of this whole thing. So COVID, we could not start a conversation without beginning with COVID. So my question for the team here, now that we've been facing and dealing with COVID for almost 2 years, What lesson and or lessons have you learned because of it? Steve, you're up first.
You're my buddy, Mark.
Yeah, I know.
So a lot of lessons came out of the whole COVID experience. One, planning, right? Having advanced planning, getting it in, everything lined up along, anything from supply chain impact, right, to customer air quality, having people vaccinated that can serve sites, what sites you can or can't go to. So, planning was key to getting through this. We were fortunate, we grew through it. Air change, air quality has a fair amount of focus on it right now. Still a lot of price-driven solutions out there, though, right? So it had focus, but it didn't necessarily drive a huge change in the industry.
Gary.
Yeah, I would agree with him as well. I mean, planning was a big thing for us. Obviously, we had to work remote a lot, so which means a lot more online meetings, a lot more, trying to get the work done and get it in a timely manner. It's kind of hard to do that when you work in a customer-facing business where you're used to going out and seeing your customers. So we had to work around those consequences of COVID as well, which we did. I think we did a pretty good job of it. However, it's never going to be the same. We got to figure out how going forward, what that means. When we say it's the new normal, we don't know what that means yet. Hopefully, it's not going to be on virtual calls every day. I really enjoy being around people and talking to people. So we learned that, virtual is good, but it can't be exactly the complete future for us.
Okay. Brad?
We've seen the value chain get flipped on its head. Overnight it went from being the energy and sustainability is the most important thing to now health and well-being. And so those tools that had been nice to have at one point, being able to know how is your building operating and what are you measuring, how are you able to demonstrate that to your tenants or your occupants, suddenly went from being a nice to have to a must have. And we're still seeing the clients that we work with struggle with understanding how do they actually take action on all the data that they're collecting, how they turn that into something that's useful insight for them and manage it. So sometimes it is a little bit of a case of trying and throw some technology in there to be able to find out what it can do. And it's okay to experiment with that. But again, we really try and orient people to what are you trying to get out of this so we can make sure we're mapping that to the correct technology solutions and operational protocols that they're going to be putting in place to really be able to take advantage of those.
Right. Howard?
So, I think the biggest thing that happened technology-wise was that COVID threw an accelerant on a lot of technology initiatives that had been lagging over the last decade or more, such as, it being able to communicate, virtual communication, remote work, hybrid workplace, data, and threw an accelerant on them. And in 6 months, we saw adoption, of things that we've been talking about literally for decades. The other big thing that I don't think is quite hit yet is I think because of the remote work from home experience, we're seeing some just fundamental shifts in the way real estate's being used, commercial real estate, especially office, that we're not seeing the impact of that yet. It's very difficult to manage. Folks are reluctant to talk about what's going on in their portfolios, if leases are going to be renewed at the same rate, if folks are going to be taking the same amount of space. But we're kind of looking, we coined a phrase at Realcomm called you've heard of the great resignation. We're calling it great reconfiguration. But we think, we do believe that there is going to be a reshuffling of portfolio and assets. So how that impacts us, I'm not sure.
All right, Paul, cleanup?
Cleanup time. So I think there's a couple lessons that everybody learned from this. Let's talk about from your own personal business. We learned how technologies have boundaries, right? The limitations and the expectations of the technology, where we all have been in Zoom meetings and WebEx and Teams meetings where we had communication problems, he dropped offline, personal bandwidth wasn't there, which is something that everybody hadn't accounted for. And then even the corporations, they were taxed on their infrastructure. The second thing that I think that was very important was really the telltale signs of who actually used the technology that they already have in their buildings. How many buildings did we see where the lights were still on, the temperatures were still maintained? Nobody used the technology to dial down their buildings when the buildings were 100% occupied. They never looked at it. Everybody just let things go. So where we did analysis in some of the programs that we've been working with, we looked at that time during where COVID started and where things are at now, when people started to return in some small impact, where they had minimum workforce there. And we saw that once the people got back at the work site, those values started to go down. They got back to a normal energy, but no one thought about, hey, let's pull the plug and turn the lights off on the way out.
Do you think that part of this whole lessons learned within COVID is the number one thing from what you have seen of, let's say, a list of 10 or 15 lessons learned?
I think it's one of the top.
Okay. All right, let's move on. I heard a couple of you talk about expectations. Let's talk about expectations. What are the new expectations you're seeing from your clients and your customers when it comes to the operational side of their buildings and the management of their buildings and facilities? Brad, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that this has woken people up to the fact that they need to be a lot more dynamic and they can't leave things running wide open. They need to be able to not only control those assets, but be able to control those remotely and be able to keep tabs on where those things are. So we're seeing an acceleration of clients who may have been able to get by with what they had, old building automation systems in multiple facilities that aren't connected, they're not networked, they're not coming together through one central location. A lot more of that is now starting to drive investment in modernizing and being able to give people that control from wherever they are. And even if it's not, more than just building automation, we're talking to people about what else is going to tie into that system. Do you need to get remote alerts from your fire alarm system? If you're going to be in your building and it's an alarm, you should know that. And most of our clients, why do I need that? Well, you might not be on your site when you're getting that information. Wouldn't that be nice information to be able to have? And again, really shifted from a nice to have to being a lot more of a must to have overnight.
Mm-hmm. Steve.
So what we're seeing is, as far as expectations, is customers really are looking for some assistance to help offset the labor shortages, right? So having capabilities of doing the remote operation and control and monitoring it really does help them save the fact that you could have an engineer have a portfolio of 3 to 5 buildings and you can't be in all 5 at one time. So therefore you have somebody else who's keeping an eye on the other 4 while they're performing tasks in the one. And really the building automation and smart buildings is an enabler for that. So they're getting an awareness and they're investing more money into putting controls and gathering data, collecting data so that they can better operate.
All right, Gary.
Yeah, so we're seeing an uptick because of our vertical we do in convenience stores. I'll just pick on them for a minute. They've become hyper aware of their food safety. So now we've been asked to do lots of wireless sensors doing food safety. We've been asked to do ionization, things that are important to indoor air quality. Again, these stores are very lightly manned. They don't have a lot of staff, and they lose somebody. They need something else checking on it. And we've had a lot more, to your point, customers going, it wasn't important and now it's important. I mean, overnight, like literally within months.
And then with respect to the markets that you serve, as you see, there's more ask occurring. And is occupancy important to the folks within your sweet spot of your customers?
Not as much as it would be in a commercial real estate environment.
Right, gotcha.
There's some ask around that, but you're not going to hear that as much.
Gotcha. Right. Howard, expectations?
Well, from my perspective, I don't have clients.
Right, but what you're hearing and what you're communicating to, the
what I
markets
see is a lot of folks have an awareness that they need to get, they need data to make better data to make decisions. They're willing to experiment, they're willing to try, but their expectations aren't always being met because they can't get the staff and the resources to be able to see some of these projects through. So I think they're backburnering, a lot of projects that are important to them. They just can't move as quickly as they'd like to. And I think that's a problem that's going to be with us for a while.
Paul, Expectations?
Yeah, expectations. I think, from my viewpoint, we have seen a lot of organizations that really found out how unsecure their devices were. Once they got into getting remote access set up, if they didn't have it, they started to put something on there, and then we actually know of people that had breaches that caused not only the issue of screwing everything up with what they injected onto that network, but the financial constraints as well, what they had to pay to get released. The second thing I think that's really an important item to address here is the fact that when you have multiple buildings you have to monitor, or a campus you have to monitor, or an enterprise you have to monitor, you cannot do it within individual engineers anymore in there. There's too much to do in a day-to-day operation. So what we're seeing is an uptick in, just like security does and IT does, an operations command center, whether it's a global command center or a localized campus command center. We see a lot of that as well.
Good. All right. Now let's go to next subject. Technology or business? Technology or business? Today, our industry, we are driven both by technology and business. From your perspective, which one do you see us being driven by, technology or the business side? Steve.
So I'm still seeing it being driven by business. Technology is there, but seeing the return hasn't been presented to a lot of the end users well. So it's still a dollar-driven decision out there, right? Technology is very intriguing, and we'll talk about digital twin and things of that nature later. But I mean, you have to have that justification, right? I mean, it's cool. I'm the biggest geek out there, right? I love all the gadgets and everything, and so are a lot of my customers. But if they can't fund it and it doesn't have a simple return, they're not going to invest in it. So.
All right, Paul, technology or business driven?
Business driven.
So
it's about the data.
Okay, but then I'll wait. I'll comment here in a minute. Howard?
Business driven. If you can't articulate a clear business case, then the technology is just not going to fly.
All right, Gary?
I agree. Business is going to drive that. Data is very important for our customers.
Okay.
ROI is still very important. Technology doesn't always follow the ROI model for a good business case.
Brad?
I tipped my hand on this in my intro. It's the business side of it, but the technology has to be there to support what those business needs are. And, I think these trends we're talking about are things that are, again, accelerants of what we've already been seeing in the industry, how many years we've been talking about. We're going to be facing these labor shortages in trained technicians, people who are able to do this work, and those people who are coming in after them aren't going to have that deep knowledge of how the building works. They're going to need to have some more of these tools that are able to help them run those buildings, operate those buildings. And really on our projects, we see the investment in technology at a very high end. There's a champion at the C-suite, at the executive level, who has a vision of what they want to be able to accomplish. It's not the person who's running the building. I'm talking to somebody who's got a flip phone, the conversation's over. When we're talking to the C-suite, now we're starting to talk about outcomes. We're starting to try and figure out what it is that they want to do as business drivers, not just the building, but their entire operation. And those are the people who not only come to us and say, hey, I have that vision, but they're setting aside money, and it's not the first thing value engineered out of the project when you get to the middle of design development. And so they're able to make sure they're protecting those dollars. They don't know what they're going to be for at the beginning of the project. We help them to find that. And then we're able to see those through.
So you mentioned a key word that I was hoping someone would mention, outcomes. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a few minutes about outcomes. What type of outcomes are your clients and your customers asking you for, or what outcomes are you trying to interject and lead the customer down that technology and all this stuff can produce, can perform for them? Steve.
So outcomes are strictly market driven, Mark. And, really, so from a healthcare perspective, it's healing time, return patient ratios, things of that nature. From an industrial, it's waste, right? How fast and how well can I manufacture things and reduce my waste, get it out, better quality control. Commercial office markets, it's retention, right? Tenant retention. What can I do? How can I reform my space so that tenants are comfortable with it being healthy and safe, right? And also being cost effective, right? Because the last thing they want to see is to have their lease costs go up because of technology, right? Or because of excessive energy use, because we've had to change the amount of airflow or air changes in a building these days. So they're looking for us, right? Those are the expectations. And how does that impact their bottom line, right? So retention of a tenant, huge returns, right? Finding new tenants is very costly.
Howard, you want to kind of
Just
piggyback?
piggybacking on
Yeah.
what Steve said, retention of tenants is huge. You know, it's a lot easier to keep one than find a new one. But also being able to provide your tenants with a bundle of services that will help them attract and retain retain talent is a big deal. Tenants are getting pretty picky now. And there's a big fight to find that bundle of amenities that a landlord or an owner can put together that will, attract and retain that tenant and allow them to, do the same with their talent.
Brad, specific outcomes that you're kind of seeing that have kind of gone to the top here that, is the same, not same, similar with different types of clients that you guys work with?
Yeah, it definitely varies per market, but some of the things that are the most impactful drivers are occupant experience or patient experience. Safety and security is always very high up on that list. They're interested in labor automation and how can we put technology in that can be a force multiplier for them so they can do more with less. And then that data-driven decision support at the top level, make sure that the executives have the information they need to be able to be actionable.
Gotcha. Gary?
Absolutely. For us, it's all about the customer care, custody, and comfort. If you notice, I didn't say anything about energy. A lot of our customers do want to save energy, but they want to retain, in our case, customers in their sites. They want them to be comfortable. They want them to be safe while they're in there, IAQ and those types of things. So absolutely, those are the outcomes that we're being asked about.
Paul?
I agree with what everybody said here. I just want to add a few things. What we're seeing a lot with the developers when they're building buildings or they're building out tenant spaces now, there is a value of technology in those spaces. Most of the tenants that they have coming into these spaces, especially ones that are going to take multiple floors, are looking for visibility of the data. The people that are, the new culture coming in wants access to that data. They want to know the building's healthy. They want to see the metrics on there. They understand the technology. They understand the sustainability metrics and ESG goals. So I think that's become a big priority with what we see. And it starts at the core of the building, and then it's built out as the tenants come into the space and expand those capabilities.
So I want to go back to one thing, but one thing I want to ask you guys, I didn't hear one of you say that the technology that we develop, produce, install, whatever, helps increase the asset value of that specific property. Do you believe what we do does help increase the asset value of a building or group of buildings, property, or whatever? Just raise your hand, yes or no.
Yes.
Yes? Yeah.
Yes, of course.
Good. So Howard, from your perspective, this is what I like. So Howard, okay, so you're kind of the lone man on the totem pole on this one. Why do you not think that the technology and services we deliver as an industry does not contribute to the asset value of the property or building?
Not saying it doesn't, but from what I've seen, it hasn't been proven out yet. I just have not seen enough data. I've been looking for it. I'd love to say, if you modernize the systems in your building, it's going to be worth more. I'd love to be able to say that. But I just, in all honesty, I haven't seen evidence of it.
Okay. All right. So.
Can I add one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So commercial space, potentially. I think the market has shifted somewhat as the technology rolls out and these organizations build these campuses out. There's also the factor of the multifamily living. And the technology is in high demand in those locations. And they've actually done the studies, and you see a lot of developers rolling this out now where they're enabling that technology from controlling your temperature in the space, the security, having cameras. almost everybody in this room has some type of technology they utilize in their home, whether it's a Nest camera, Nest thermostat, whatever. People want that. Okay, and that I think enables, and it brings a higher revenue for the apartment, and it brings a higher occupancy level in those as well.
I agree. I think if we see it, we'll see some indications of multifamily.
All right, everybody's talked about data. So here's a question that I often debate. We know the value of data. We can access it. We can get it. We can normalize it. We can tag it. We can do basically almost anything and everything with data today. But the question I have is, who owns the data? Who should own the data? Is it the building owner operator? Is it the service provider? Is it somebody else out there? So let me Howard, I'll talk with you. Who do you believe should own the data that is generated from buildings?
In my knee-jerk reaction is it's the owner.
Okay.
The customer.
Yeah, the customer should own it.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, Paul?
Can't debate this anymore. It's got to be there.
Yep.
Good.
It's the owner,
Okay.
but there's a huge value to that data.
Absolutely.
So if the owner elects to free that data or a certain portion of that data, that's their prerogative, obviously. And maybe it's a revenue stream for them where instead of it's the opposite way, where they're taking your data from a cloud service and utilizing that data for their sales pitch and marketing, maybe they get a return in revenue from that.
They should have a choice.
Absolutely.
Brad?
Well, Howard just let the cat out of the bag and shared one of the dirty little secrets in our industry is that we don't have a lot of great data to go back to look at.
Right.
Benchmark, what is the value of this? We talk a lot about return on value, not on return on investment. It's harder to calculate when you're talking about a people factor, right? What is that impact of productivity? How do you really measure that? You can put a lot of factors into that, like sick leave and absenteeism, other things, but it's still a soft item. So how do we really value something like that that's harder to measure than energy, which is a pretty linear calculation? Right. But I think you do have to have that data that's available to anybody else that could get out there to folks like us who are able to do research on the data and be able to start telling clients, here's what you should be doing with your building to make it operate better. If the building doesn't own that, if the client doesn't own that, that's going to be something that's very difficult for anybody to be able to help out with.
That's why IT has policies for that. Information security policies. It's exactly for that reason, right?
All right, Gary, from your perspective, as far as who in your world do you believe should own that data, or who does own the data for that
The
matter?
customer owns the data,
Okay.
but the customer doesn't necessarily use the data.
Right.
It's been my experience in this business, as long as I've been doing it, that most customers are not sophisticated in data usage. So we end up, because we have monitoring and maintenance services that we can tack on if you want to do that with us.
Right.
We end up using the customer's data for their benefit more than they would.
But they gave you the permission.
Yes.
And they
Right.
gave you, okay, it's our data, but you can use it. Here's your access to it, and
Yes.
you do what you do.
Case in point, though, we do have a customer who wants 5 years of data. I've never heard them call up and ask me for 5 years of data.
Right. Gotcha.
It's more of a tagline thing. I think they feel safe by asking that.
Right.
But nobody's really using it.
Steve?
So I agree, right? Customer owns it, but it's a collaboration because cohort analysis is much stronger and can provide better results than just linear regression, right? And that's what everybody's doing right now is where did I start and where am I going, right? So that cohort data and looking at what other buildings are doing in same geography, same weather pattern, same building type or equipment types, and then comparing that and then looking for optimization and or improvement areas is key. So we've got to work with the customers and yes, they own it, but we have to ask the permission.
Did you want to add something?
I just want to add, one of the things that we started to incorporate when we develop a program is a data governance structure. Explaining what it is, who, what, and where is engaged with that, and what the outcome is going to be of those decisions that they make.
Okay.
And really, it belongs to a couple of people, right? The CIO of the organization and the CFO. Those are the two governing authorities, and then the teams that work with that data.
Gotcha.
But the big issue I see is not only just sharing the data, but what happens if you part ways with there? How do you scrub the data and not retain that data where it all comes back to you and it's not out there in wherever it's at.
And I think that when it comes to data is a key part, because while hopefully a relationship is a long time, not all relationships last forever. And again, to me, data is, again, we all agree on this panel, and I'm sure the group out here, data is the new Elvis. It's the king of our world. And, you know, and so let's move on. So convergence, let's talk a little bit about convergence. I think in our industry, we have all agreed that OT and IT have converged. I don't think there's really too many people out here who would disagree. But one new convergence area that I believe is we are beginning to see and will become the norm here as we continue to move is the convergence of the traditional operational management side of the business, HVAC, lighting, whatever, access control, whatever, blah, 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 and what we call now the new workplace stuff, i.e. occupancy, indoor air quality, measuring productivity, if that's part of it. Do you guys feel that that's accurate? If yes, great. Tell me, you know, have you seen that in your work and or conversations with clients and customers? Or no, you don't see that yet, and maybe that will continue to be separate worlds. So again, convergence of the operational side and the workplace side. Steve.
So we are seeing some convergence. It's being forced only because of cybersecurity and access into systems, right? So we're seeing that password management and, you know, hardware management, shutting down the right ports, opening up the right ports. Those types of things are very critical. So, you know, bringing those together, especially in the remote workplace, because more people are trying to access those things from outside of the building, right? And it's a little harder to lock down.
Okay. Howard?
Well, yeah, you know, from a landlord perspective, you know, I saw it become important a couple of years ago, just starting with access control and integrating access control with destination elevators, getting people up to the tenant space, and in the, you know, in the tenant space itself, you know, maintaining the, you know, the environment, whether it's, you know, automated shading, lighting, you know, controlling the air, the indoor air quality in conference rooms. You know, managing, you know, the utilization tracking and people tracking to, you know, to manage hot desking and other things, integrating, you know, the IoT sensors with the BMS. Yeah, it's I think it's turned out to be a little bit more complex than a lot of folks, or, you know, early anticipated, but I think it is that is the next generation. That's the next layer on top of, you know, APIs in our smart building stack. Absolutely.
Paul?
And I think you're going to see convergence, you know, we talk about workplace planning, right?
Right.
That's a huge impact now with the way things have turned out in the past 2 years. They have to restructure. A lot of the original designs on new buildings coming in all changed once we hit COVID. But the other thing is, I think a lot of people didn't realize the data sources in the systems until there started to become more convergence of IT and OT, because everybody works in their own silos now. And now they're finding, you know, and we look at this holistically and say, there are multiple things that different team members need to be engaged with to share that knowledge base, to help really understand what's your final outcome? What are you trying to achieve? And I think that's a huge thing. Everything's been siloed so much before, and it impacts budget and cost of building out. If you're all on the same page initially, you can eliminate a lot of the overhead that you see in construction budgets right now.
Gary? I'm coming, Brad, sorry.
I agree. There's been some convergence. IoT is a particular one that I love. You know, the smart.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, I love buzzwords.
Yeah.
Early on, I called it the Internet of Threats, and we've seen that because of the comments made about cybersecurity. So it's not as easy.
We are going to talk about. Go ahead.
Not as easy as everybody thought it was.
Right.
That's right.
So is there convergence? Absolutely. We're seeing some of that now with the ESG initiatives. Again, places you never thought that wanted IOQ, now they want IAQ because of the ESG. So we're going to see some, but it's going to be slow.
Okay. Brad?
I wanted to piggyback off what Paul was saying. because I'd like to think that we've got a lot more of the silos that are being torn down. We talk about delivering intelligent buildings in a way that tearing down those silos between the trades, between our design practices. But the fact is, our clients are still working in those silos, and they don't know from department to department how to empathize with each other to be able to prioritize those business needs. They're looking out for what are their own territories, what are the things that are giving them headaches that day, that week.
But does that go to culture? In other words, that's the way it's been. That's the way we did it. We've been doing it for 25 years, and that culture just keeps going, and the culture is not changing.
It is. I'd like to see it change, but we don't have positions of chief integration officers at the companies that we're working with. I don't think it's just because the CIO title is already taken.
Right.
We just aren't seeing that driven from that top. There isn't a champion saying you are going to work differently and here's how you're going to do it. People work in their domains. We're also specialized and expert in those things that we're doing. That is really difficult for people to be able to pull back and understand how the rest of the business works to even know how they can be influencing each other.
So on that title thing, so one area that I'm beginning to see is a new title, Chief Smart Building Officer. Are you guys kind of beginning to see that? And that person, that office addresses many of the things you just brought up, Brad. Are you guys, anybody throwing that at you guys yet, or?
I'm interested that you see that. I've not been running into that. Okay. You know, the best that we're getting is the place where we've got a IT person who has an interest in facilities, has helped support facilities for years, and now they're moving over and they're working in that facilities department. They're an excellent liaison to the IT department. They know the culture, they know the language, they know what those values are. But those are unicorns. That's not something that we get a lot of. When we do have those in place, you put that champion, you put the budget in place, and then you put somebody who's able to cut across those divisions. That is really a great recipe for success. We need more of it. I don't see a huge trend at this point yet moving in that direction. I think it's going to be up to us to educate those owners on the value of thinking like that.
I think a lot of those folks end up with the CTO title, the Chief Technology Officer title.
Okay. All right. Let's, one also thing I think we can agree with the convergence side, and we talked a little bit about this in some of the comments you guys made, is the technology today. We are, those of us who provide the technology and the services, we're being asked that this technology, these solutions and services do more. Do you guys agree with that statement? That, again, existing systems in place have to do more than they traditionally have been set up and or designed to do. Is that a fair statement from the group here? Okay. All right, let's move on to responsibility is the topic. In particular, the occupant experience. We all know it has become part of a smarter building today, driven by the whole health and safety concerns. We all know that. IAQ, the changing role of the environment, and so forth and so on. So we know what the drivers are. But who is responsible for those initiatives? Is it the building owner, or is it the tenant? In other words, and again, this is more applying not to a corporate space, but more of a tenant-based space. Who has the responsibility, owner or tenant? Howard.
I think the simple answer is the owner for the common areas and providing the plumbing for the tenant so that the tenant can control their own spaces.
Okay. Brad?
I work on a lot of owner-occupied buildings, so I have less perspective on this than I think some others would, but I think that building the right backbone, right? Putting the right technology in place so
That's
that
the plumbing.
everybody else, can go ahead and tag on to that. And I think I'm going to just leave it to the rest of you.
Gary?
Absolutely, it's the owner, but in my experience, when I was in commercial real estate, in some of the buildings we had, the higher Class A buildings that went green early before it was cool to do it, the tenants were very involved in their space and their occupancy and everything else that was handling it. And so we actually worked with them hand in hand. So they did own some of it. It wasn't like they just said, do everything, but we'll help you. You go this, take it this far, we'll do the rest.
Steve?
So it's a shared responsibility, Mark. It really, the owners have to get the infrastructure in place so that the tenants can leverage it and then follow and stay in compliance, right? And or add to the ESG, right? So,
which we'll talk about too, ESG. Paul?
ESG stuff.
I agree. It's a shared responsibility. No doubt about that.
How about this? Is this statement a little profound related to this? is the whole concept of health, safety, indoor air quality, et cetera, becoming the new amenity? In other words, do we think that, okay, yeah, I'm a tenant, in this case, a tenant, I'm moving in, and whether it's owner responsible or tenant, but do we think owners will add that to, these are types of amenities you can have, again, go through the list, I want this and this and this, of course you're going to pay for it. Is it the new amenities that we're going to see? Steve?
So I don't think it is, right? It runs in the background, right? And yeah, just ensuring that they have comfortable spaces and well lit and well ventilated, well filtered spaces. They don't necessarily, the tenants don't necessarily see that, and I don't see property management firms or leasing agents promoting it out there, right? They might promote that it has latest technology, but they don't go into detail. So I don't really see that it isn't, it's not a clear spoken amenity at least.
All right, Brad?
I think it's table stakes. It's not the sexy stuff. It's going to be the sell sheet. You get
Right.
angle and sparkly stuff in front of people still to get them really excited.
Howard, Paul? One of you?
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree. I think it's
Yeah.
stable. It's a must have, not a nice to have, but I
Right.
think, there's a question that I always think of in terms of, when a landlord starts being responsible for especially health in a tenant space, it just feels to me that there's a tremendous liability.
Yeah.
There is.
And
I think you're going to
that-
see more and more of that come to the surface as far as the liability side, and an owner, whether corporate owned or building owner
Right.
owned, that is going to become more of an issue because HR is going to drive that. No question about it. And they're beginning to drive that.
It's a lot
I
of.
think legal is going to
Yeah,
drive
let's-
it.
yeah, for sure. All
Risk
right.
avoidance.
I didn't get
Yeah.
I didn't get to answer that one.
Oh, yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
So obviously, I'm going to come from a different perspective. We'll pick on the convenience stores again. There's a lot of churn rate as far as different people in those touching everything else. It will very well be an amenity to have probably a sticker on that store saying, we're ionization, we're doing these air changes, we're doing the fit well, whatever it is. That's going to be considered an amenity by some customers, and they will go there because of that.
Yeah. And that's where I think too, the whole indoor air quality, all that, is that for people to go to a specific convenience store, to return back to their offices or whatever, one thing has got to come out of this is trust. That building, that facility, that
Right.
store is, I feel that I can walk in there and I'm in a trusted environment. So I think that's kind of where I'm seeing it too. So let's move on. Digital twins is our next subject. We've heard a lot about digital twins. What is it? Is it a technology? Is it a practice? How do you see it fitting into the built environment? Anybody want to go first on this one? Come on. No, Steve, you're hemming and hawing.
I mean, digital twin,
Yeah.
BIM modeling, very similar. One's operations after it's built, the other is pre-construction. Again, you have to have somebody that has a life cycle mindset and that really understands the impact that it's going to have. It's just like analytics, right? I mean, analytics really hasn't taken off the way it should have, only because of getting the buy-in, right? They have to understand the value of it, and they have to see the results, and they have to have the case studies to show that it works, applicable to what they do, right? And then applying that to their business metrics, and then finding a way to mix the two to really show a good payback.
But is it a technology? Is it a practice? Is it a combination thereof, or?
It's not new. It's a mix of technology. There's software that makes it easier from a initial cost of building. It's hard to justify at times but it's just because it takes a little extra time. Right?
Sure.
You got to pay the software license.
Sure, Paul, I want to get you, and I'm not,
Yeah, no,
because
you're
of all
fine.
these questions, you may not get called on some of these questions. I want to keep going, but go ahead.
So I think, I agree with Steve.
No.
It's more effective on the operational side for our industry because asset management has always been a huge issue in our industry, right? So.
All right, let's move on to cybersecurity. We cannot have a conversation and not address have thoughts on cybersecurity. We know it's paramount to each and every building, no matter what kind. And, but who is responsible for cybersecurity and making sure there are responsible cybersecurity practices, protocols, good cyber posture, fill in the blanks or whatever. Who has that responsibility? You're big in cyber, so let's talk.
Everyone.
Okay.
If you won't do it at home, don't do it at work.
I think we raise the bar a little bit above that, can't we, Paul?
So, but I mean, that's the reality, right?
Right.
How can you be so secure at home and on your phone and making sure that you don't do crazy things? Then why would you click on a link at work in an email or something else?
Okay.
So obviously everyone has a stake in it. It rolls all the way up from the IT, making sure their network's secure and they keep everything upgraded to the patch management, change management process. It's done on the operation side as well. And I think that's where we see a lot of weakness right now, because there's been no formalized operational plan for change management and security patching or firmware upgrades on hardware devices. You're running the same stuff you ran 20 years ago.
All right, Gary, you want to comment about cyber? Whose responsibility do you think it is?
Well, dealing with the owner's IT department would be the owner, but we have a responsibility to bring products that can be tested in that environment that meets their specifications. And we need to be very aware of the updating, change management, if you will, what that's going to cost us, because it's cost us over warranty time.
Right.
Sometimes people forget that part. So we both have to kind of own it.
Yeah. Steve?
So, working with the customer's IT department to make sure that all the ports and everything are locked down, and the OT part of it is critical, because password crackers will break everything else. But we have a responsibility also, because in construction, it's quite common in our industry to use the branch name or the branch phone number or something as the password into it, and been using it for 35 years, right? And old habits die hard, right? So it's our responsibility to make sure that we don't make it any easier, right, for people to get in and infect our customers' buildings. But it is the customer's responsibility to work with us to make sure that the hardware is locked down, right? We're not broadcasting, we're not, we don't have ports open that shouldn't be, and those types of things.
So I would have to agree with Paul. To me, it's a shared responsibility. It's the technology providers to help ensure that their solutions, their products are as cyber secure as possible. They follow certain guidelines, protocols. It's the owner operator. Once he's meeting, or she, or you're meeting with them, I would have to think that should be one of their top 5 questions that they ask as you are having a consultation, a debrief of what they are looking to do within their buildings.
Right.
And then the last one is those folks who are on the ground, the Garys of the world, the Steves of the world, who are out there deploying this technology, that you should be proactive and bring it up. In my opinion, if you bring it up and the owner says, I don't care about it, my opinion, although that job is enticing, walk away or convince them. Brad, just perspective on your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's integrator we touched on, right?
Yeah.
That's something that's going to be important too.
Right.
Many of us have walked into an IT room and you've got these enterprise Cisco switches, and right next to that there's a blue off the shelf at Best Buy switches plugged in there. And this is, again, getting back to the IT department not working well with the facilities department. Facilities going, just make it easy for me, integrator. I just will take whatever you can do to get us running right now, and don't talk to the IT department because we're afraid of the Department of No. So I think we got to get over that perception and get people working together and tear down the silos in our own companies, organizations, and not just our own industry.
A quick show of hands. Do you believe that as a industry itself, again, broad question, that we have accepted the role of cybersecurity in the built space? And again, when I'm saying the industry, it's the technology providers, it is the integrators, it is the owner, the operators, IT, O2, it doesn't matter. Do you believe that the industry truly is accepting the importance of cyber at this time today? You do.
Heading in the right direction.
Okay.
Now, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Not there yet.
Overall,
We're still
overall,
working in progress. Yeah, I would agree with that. It's
Work in progress.
Well, you know, we're getting some traction, but most of it is still work in progress. All right, next question is, we're all concerned about the environment, sustainability, ESG, so forth and so on. Before we get a quick question on ESG, let's talk about charging stations at buildings. All right. They're no longer a nice to have, but they are becoming more and more popular. And again, depending on the building, Class A for sure. You know, B, C, certain retailers have adopted charging stations, again, for that customer experience and so forth and so on. Do we believe that charging stations, as they continue to progress and become increased at locations, should they become part of the building operating management platform that is running that building? Brad?
I'm seeing nods from the group, so I'm going to go with no, to be honest. I work with a lot of clients who say, you know, let's get this thing connected to a cellular modem and push that off somebody. Let someone else manage that as a service. We don't need to be able to take that on. And so I think that's fairly common. And I think I've set up a little bit of controversy for other folks to be able to.
No, that's good. Gary, especially, again, your marketplace, I go into X convenience store and I'm gonna run in there. Yeah, I'm there, maybe get gas. If not, I'm in there to go get beer, get a sandwich, get whatever it is. You know, I want to charge my car. You know, are you being asked, you know, to bring that into the fold?
I don't think so. And again, with the data, my customer base, more data is not a good thing.
Okay.
Again, cell modem, it's going somewhere else.
Sure.
It's third party, leased it out or something, leased a parking spot out. Get some of the profits from the charging, whatever.
All right.
Probably see
Anybody
some-
else want to comment? Because I want a couple more quick questions. Yeah.
Real quick, so now with ADR out there, some of the incentives, so they got ADR 2.4, which is automatic demand response for those who aren't familiar with it. Smart panels in the EV charging stations play an integral part because you may have to do load rolling and load shedding, right? Because the last thing you want to do is cut off somebody's charging of their car and then have them not be able to get someplace. So it's a fine balance, right? So smart grid and all that are integral in that decision.
Howard, Paul, real quick.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, you know, as an owner, I think if you're picking up the energy costs on that, you definitely want to be aware of that because those things are expensive.
Yes.
You got to figure out a way to monetize them.
All right, real quickly on ESG. Of these 4 factors, you have to pick one. Which one do you think will have the most significant impact to ensure a successful ESG program implementation for long term? Is it commitment? Is it accountability? Is it metrics? Is it standards or directives? Commitment, accountability, metrics, standards or directives. Let's go down at the end, Brad, and we'll work our way up.
I think it's accountability because so many of the people who are occupying these buildings are demanding of the landlord or demanding of the owner, the client, that they're going to be able to work in a building that meets the expectations that they have.
Okay, Gary?
I believe it's going to be standards and directives.
All right, Steve?
I think it's accountability, with the benchmarking and everything that took place and how it dropped off a couple of years later. I think there's got to be more accountability for it.
All right, Howard?
Yeah, I think, you know, you can't do a good ESG program without all of them, but I think commitment kind of sits on the top.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with accountability as well.
All right, good. All right, now, next one is what I call the leap. Again, the leap. What do you think will be the biggest leap we will experience in our buildings and facilities this year and 3 years from now? Again, let's be short, direct answers so we can get finished what we want to do. The leap. Howard.
Tough one. This year, not sure. 3 years from now, probably data and I don't know.
Okay, that's good. That's fine. Paul?
I think the biggest leap's going to be more access to the data right now. Things are going to get connected, a lot of IoT sensors. And I think 3 years from now, that's really when you're going to see the operational digital twin take effect where the assets can be managed that way.
All right. Steve?
I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going with talent acquisition. Finding people that can go out and deploy this. So that's the biggest leap.
Gary, biggest leap?
I'm going to agree with talent acquisition, also IAQ.
Okay.
3 years. That's going to be.
Brad?
This year, I think it's getting people back in those buildings safely. And then in 3 years, I think it's going to be people being able to interact with those buildings in a lot more rich ways.
All right, now let's go to the lightning round. While the pandemic was and remains a huge disruption, do you think it accelerated the adoption of technology and solutions within the built environment? Yes or no, or I plead the fifth. Brad?
No doubt.
So that's a yes. Okay, Gary?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Okay, second lightning round. Can you have a smart building without data? Paul?
No.
Howard?
No.
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 Steve?
Hard no,
Brad?
Mark.
Okay, good. Is IP catapulting buildings to become smarter? Brad?
No.
Gary?
No.
I'm going to go with yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Okay.
So if it's not doing it.
Is 2022, this is a good one, is 2022 going to be the golden era for smarter buildings? Paul?
No.
Howard?
No.
Go the line, just go down. Gary?
Plead
No.
the fifth.
Oh, that's a good one. All right, Brad? Okay,
No.
okay.
I have no crystal ball.
How about this? Are state and local government building standards for performance, IAQ, carbon reduction inevitable? Will they, they're coming, will they be forced? Paul?
Yes.
Howard?
Plead the fifth.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Do you agree the way a building is operated and managed is part of a company's or organization's brand? Brad?
Yes.
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 Yep.
Yes.
I'm going to plead the fifth.
Okay, good one. Well,
Everybody's.
is all the talk about, sorry, another one. Will metaverse make its way into the built environment? Paul?
Yes. Adding on to my digital twin conversation.
Okay. Howard?
Yes.
Okay. Steve?
Yes, but I hope the hell not.
Okay. Gary?
Yes, but it's a long ways away.
Okay. Brad?
Take the fifth.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you for all that. We now have 30 seconds or so. Brad, let's work our way up. Any closing remarks you want to provide us?
Yeah, thank everybody for being here, and I'm going to put a plug in for the Building Intelligence Group. This is a local meetup group. It's an organization combining all of those different trades, all those different disciplines, all the different people in the owner side of things. So very inclusive, and right now we've been meeting in Minneapolis and Chicago for 3 or 4 years, proof of concept, working on spinning this out to other cities as people can start meeting together. We got about 20 more cities that people are, like Paul, going to be founding chapters in. So if you're interested in that, connect, and we'll either point you to the chapter founder or tell you how you can get one started in your own community.
Hey, Gary?
So as we go forward with the new technologies, it's a conversation you and I have had, Mark. People too often get caught up in the hip and hype. And really what it ends up in the end of the day, what's going to be real and relevant, is actually what's going to help the customer. And I want to add one more to that, real, relevant, and responsible.
Good.
That's where we need to end up when we make our decisions, whatever they are.
Steve?
So I'd like to ask everybody to promote this trade or this, this industry to the young people out there, right? And I mean, the technology and everything, we're at cross between white collar and blue collar. So if you really enjoy putting things together or seeing things built, but you have a technical mind, right? Just promote it, get it out there at the high school level. Don't wait to college.
Howard?
That's a good one. And again, I'm just going to bring up Realcomm IBCon conference in June, where a lot of us get together and we have these conversations over a couple of days. I think you'd agree. It's over golf, it's over cocktails, it's over coffee, and we really surface a lot of these big issues. So more will be coming out on that soon. And it's been an honor to be here with you guys. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Paul, last one?
Wrapping things up, look at the age of our panel.
No, don't.
I just want to say one thing. I think it's our obligation as mentors, and I'm going to call us mentors, technology, to drive change in our industry, to bring more women into this industry, and not just at the technology level, but previous conversation I sat in, it was a very informative group discussion, that we bring them into all levels of technology and workplace environment. And I think secondly, that's really important, is we have to start driving that change, because if nobody does it, it's not going to get done. This difference between a boss and a leader, right? A leader guides people, mentors people, lets them be their replacement as they move on to different responsibilities. A boss just demands things. So let's be leaders.
Big round of applause for our panel. I don't know if there's anything, if anybody has any quick questions, feel free to throw them out. Yes, ma'am.
As a young woman in this industry, right, how do we build another group of you guys quickly in young people? What do we need to see? What characteristics do you guys feel are most relevant?
I'll start. I think first and foremost is interest, passion, commitment. And I'm just going to leave it at that so we can do short. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody?
I just was going to say, as Brad mentioned, we're going to try to develop the awareness through like organizations like BIG, where we address these type of issues. And I think that's a starting point for everybody. And then just more engagement with different organizations. Everybody, again, like our industry is siloed, right? We have to be very much collaborative in this.
And some of you were in
Any quick comments?
Yeah, some of you were in the last session or in yesterday's session about the Coalition for Smarter Buildings, and coalition is really focused on that job training and on recruiting down at that high school, at that college level. So I think it's really going to take that concerted effort by all of us.
And I think also part of it, there's still a perception issue in our industry. Perception is, facility management, building operations. You know, we all immediately have a picture of that. Are those who are not in this industry. We are a hell of a lot much more than that. Again, with the technology. I mean, who would ever thought I could be sitting in San Diego, California on a screen controlling and managing a building in New York City? So, I mean, we got some exciting stuff as a group. So, any other quick ones? Bill.
I just want to say, that was fabulous, and you're like the Wink Martin there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good comment, Bill. Mark.
Anyway, don't know. Now that name is going to stick. So, anyway.
It's already posted on LinkedIn.
No, it better not be. All right.
It's a hashtag trending right now.
Really appreciate your time and your contribution. Thank you.
So just for context.